The NFL scouting combine played out really well for the Chicago Bears to make things that much easier to trade the number one overall pick.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lorin Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at Locked On Bears. You can like Locked On Bears on Facebook. Join the Locked On Bears Facebook group for even more Bears talk. And make sure you hit that subscribe button on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel to keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And on the show today, we go through what we learned from the NFL Scouting Combine over the weekend that should make things that much easier for the Chicago Bears to get a good deal on a trade down from the number one overall pick. This is less going to be about players the Bears should be watching, et cetera, and more about the dynamics that go into play here for that move down, which we keep hearing could be sooner rather than later, depending on how these negotiations go over the next few days, weeks, and potentially a month or so. But I think the big thing that you have to start with for the Chicago Bears in this combine is players they're not interested in drafting, but that other teams are interested in drafting and want to get potentially to the number one overall spot to select, or even to get up to 2, 3, or 4 and be a potential spot for the Bears to trade down even a second time to make sure that they can go get the other quarterback that doesn't end up going number 1 or maybe number 2 and how the quarterbacks play out. This was a good weekend for the top quarterbacks in the draft to really solidify themselves as top quarterback prospects. This is not a draft class that as of now has that clear-cut top dog that every team is clamoring for. There's not that automatic consensus, this guy's going to go number 1, and we just need to determine which team will give up the most to make sure they go and get him. But fortunately, at the Combine, multiple top quarterbacks impressed in their own ways to make it feel like a team can feel good about falling in love with their guy and going up and getting their guy, even if it's not the same quarterback that every other team might want. So first of all, we had Bryce Young from Alabama measure in at 5'10" and a little over, and just over 200 pounds as well, which the height wasn't that big of a surprise to me. He's the exact same height as Kyler Murray was at the Combine, and I think a half an inch shorter than Russell Wilson. But for him to be up at I think it was 206 pounds was what he weighed in at the Combine. That was, for me, the bigger concern. We've started to see some short quarterbacks have varying amounts of success, right? I mean, we can talk about Baker Mayfield and his ups and downs and Murray's ups and downs, and now Wilson's on his downswing, but he's won a Super Bowl. Height itself doesn't have to be a total inhibiting factor to success, but Bryce Young looked so slight and so small, and there were durability questions about him, coming out of Alabama. He was very good on the field, but how well can he hold up from NFL hits? And him adding what looks to be fairly good weight from how we've seen him continue to bulk up here at over 200 pounds alleviates some, not all, but some of those concerns. He's up at around the same weight that Kyler Murray was coming out of the draft and not that far below where Russell Wilson was. And not that, he's not going to prevent any and all injuries, but maybe there's a little bit more meat on those bones, literally, to keep him more durable. So that can alleviate some teams' concerns, or at least, reduce some of the concerns about Bryce Young's size and say, okay, he checks a 200-pound box for us there. He checks a 5'10" box. It's not quite a box, but we can feel more comfortable to trade up to number 1 and make sure that we go get our guy. Or, if the Bears trade down to 2 or trade down to 4 and a different quarterback goes 1, teams could still trade up somewhere to get their guy in Bryce Young, even if it's not the number 1 overall pick. Perhaps the star quarterback of the Combine week was Anthony Richardson from Florida. We knew he was big, fast, and strong, but we really got to measure that out and compare it to other quarterbacks with the over 40-inch vertical and 10'9" broad jump that I think were both NFL Combine records for the quarterback position, and he ran about the same 40-yard dash time as Justin Fields. So, but at 6'4", 244 pounds, I mean, he's got the athletic comparisons, the physical build comparisons to Cam Newton, and really kind of performed that way at the Combine. Plus, he showed off a pretty strong arm throwing in the drills to wide receivers there that we knew he already had. But this feels like it's cementing a lot of his status as a top 10 pick in this draft, even if he's not going to be the number one guy per se. But you start to hear the whispers and the rumors and the murmurings around the NFL draft world, and you start to take a look at the odds over with our friends at FanDuel, for example, in the NFL draft, and Anthony Richardson's odds for number one overall pick keep going up just a little bit, and first quarterback drafted odds keep going up just a little bit. He's still third in both cases behind Bryce Young and CJ Stroud on FanDuel, but something to keep an eye on there, because Stroud, another one of the quarterbacks from the Combine that had a really strong day throwing. He didn't do the athletic testing side, but just doing the throwing, and we knew this was a guy with some great accuracy and touch, but like when you have to throw, it's one thing when you're throwing to your own Ohio State receivers that you know well, but when you go to the Combine and it's new wide receivers on an open field and just cones and space out there, it can be a little bit awkward sometimes to time things up perfectly, but Stroud really, really looked sharp and kind of kept at the front of his game as well, as everyone's wowed by Richardson's size and speed and impressed or satisfied with Bryce Young's weight. Like Stroud reminded everybody too that, hey, I'm the really accurate, really smart, great pocket passing quarterback in this draft, and I deserve to be in this conversation as well. So all three of those guys really looking like top 10 pick type players, and that's not to take anything away from Will Levis, who is also a big, strong-armed quarterback, and teams are impressed with him as well. So while the Combine didn't give us like the overall like separation of clear favorite, all these quarterbacks got a boost up. No one disappointed in that way that would have lowered the trade value for the Chicago Bears and made these teams feel like, oh, we don't have to trade up to 1 to get him. We don't have to trade up into the top 5 to get him. We can just wait and let him fall because, he wasn't as impressive at the Combine as we thought. The quarterback hype is building, and that is great news for your Chicago Bears. The other nice thing about the Combine, though, was that some of the other players that performed well can give Ryan Poles and you as a Chicago Bears fan confidence in the Bears' ability to still land a very, very good player, even when, presumably, they trade down from the number one overall pick. I was going to use the word if, but it feels like a win at this point that they actually do make this deal. But man, the wide receiver class in particular got a nice boost, and we'll learn more about where they did and how that kind of establishes a great opportunity for the Bears to maybe go get that piece to pair with Justin Fields next on Locked On Bears. The Locked On Bears podcast is powered by Built Bar, the world's best tasting protein bars, because Built Bars taste like candy bars, but they have all the nutrients of a protein bar. If I was training for the NFL Combine, I know Built Bars would be a big part of my regimen because they're a big part of my everyday regimen. They're low sugar, low calories, high fiber, and high protein. I eat one literally every single day because they're soft, easy to chew, covered in 100% real chocolate. It's the perfect combination of good tasting and good for you. They come in a bunch of great flavors. You can find them all at Built.com, or if you want to go get them even quicker, you can head to your nearest Walmart over by the pharmacy section. They've got 4-bar boxes of the cookies and cream, double chocolate, or the coconut puffs. All three excellent choices. But my favorite flavors, they've got them at Sam's Club right now. They've got a 13-bar box. It's a combo box with their 2 of their hit flavors, brownie batter and churro. Those are 2 I reorder all the time, and I cannot recommend them enough. Head over to Sam's Club, head over to Walmart, head over to Built.com, try out some Built Bars. Trust me, you will thank me later. The Chicago Bears have to be thanking some of these wide receivers and other players, offensive linemen and some pass rushers as well. Some of these players at significant positions of need for the Chicago Bears performing very well at the Combine and showing, either confirming things that we were already pretty sure about or even raising the level up even just a little bit more. Like, for example, Jackson Smith-Njigba from Ohio State, one of Justin Fields' college wide receivers. They weren't together there very long. I don't know that they were on the field a ton together, but they were barely teammates at Ohio State. There is a certain level of familiarity there. He didn't run the 40-yard dash. And that's something that we've kind of wanted to see from him. And there's some questions about what his 40-yard dash long speed looks like. But he absolutely killed it in the vertical and broad jumps to show that explosiveness. And he's got great route running in the drills too. I mean, and really fast 3-cone at 6.57 seconds. And his 20-yard shuttle was really a 3.93 seconds. Like, he did really well in every area he was asked to show explosiveness and the ability to change direction. And, for a guy who's primarily a slot wide receiver, that's what matters the most, right? He's a guy who just knows how to get open. He's explosive. He's shifty. He might not beat everybody in a foot race down the sideline. That's kind of the one question mark still. And I feel like it's pretty easy to live with, right? Especially for a slot wide receiver. Sure, you would like him to have a little bit more straight line speed, but he's not a guy that you're going to be chucking 60-yard bombs to a ton. And, how many plays are there where you're really, truly, after the catch, trying to outrun everybody down the sideline, right? It happens maybe a couple of times a game for either team total, so let alone him being the guy involved with that. It really, I think, again, kind of confirmed a lot of what we saw from him on tape, and we'll see maybe he runs a 40-yard dash at his combine or not, or at his pro day or not, but he's a guy that, we've been talking about a lot of these wide receivers in the, mid to late first round range, right? Maybe 15, maybe 20, maybe 25 for some of these different guys. And with combine performances like these, you can feel a little bit better about cementing them closer and even into that top 10, depending on which receiver and which flavor of wide receiver you like. Like, if you want more of that true built like a number one outside receiver, Quentin Johnson from TCU had a nice showing as well. It wasn't like he blew everyone away with like the world's fastest 40-yard dash time, but still he was able to show great explosiveness numbers with a 40.5-inch vertical jump and an 11'2" broad jump. He can get up there and be that big-bodied wide receiver. Maybe he'll run a 40-yard dash at his pro day as well. We'll see if he gets, if he ends up taking that opportunity. But for a guy to have that kind of explosiveness at the big body size that he has, that's what you look for in, that big time outside number one wide receiver. Maybe you have some of the same questions about ability to outrun guys, but at that kind of size, you're not expecting him to be the fastest player on the field. That's not his skill set exactly. And so I don't know that we're going to lose too much sleep over the 40-yard dash in that conversation. And again, if you want that true number one type, that it's not one of those in free agency, and there's not very many guys that are built that big that can catch balls like he can, that might be the Bears' best opportunity to get one, trading down and getting somebody like Quentin Johnson from TCU after a trade down from the number one pick. And you can feel more secure in that, if they trade down, there's going to be some wide receivers like them. And we'll throw Zay Flowers from Boston College in there as well, ran a 4.42 with a 10.7 broad jump and a 35.5-inch vertical. Like, he checked a lot of the boxes we were looking for. And it's like, okay, these wide receivers are legit. They match what we're seeing on tape. We're confirming a lot of those things. And there's a premium on the wide receiver position that it's going to kind of build them up and up into the top 20, into the top 15, maybe into the top 10 as things go higher and higher. And that is a lot more comfortable feeling when you're trading down and feeling like you can still get a big-time playmaker. Same thing with some of the offensive linemen. Peter Skoronski from Northwestern is a guy we've talked a lot about and you've heard a lot about in the pre-draft process. He's someone who moved really well, kind of as expected. Arms were also a little bit short, kind of like expected, but again, it's checking some of these boxes and seeing how they can do. And a couple of the other offensive linemen ran in sub 5-second 40-yard dashes. You're seeing some of the necessary athleticism for some of the bigger offensive tackles in this class. And you're again feeling like, whether the Bears trade down to 7 or 9 or even a little bit farther, depending on if there's a double trade down situation, like there's going to be 2 or 3 wide receivers around that area. There's going to be 2 or 3 offensive linemen around that area. On Friday, we talked about some of the edge rushers and defensive tackles. Lucas Van Ness and Tyree Wilson, these guys, and Kalijah Cansey from Pittsburgh. There's like 6, 8, 9, 10 guys all in this draft range between like 5 and 15 that the Bears look like they may be trading down into. And they should have their choice of a couple of receivers, couple of linemen, couple of defensive linemen, etc. And you can feel like, man, the Bears are in a really great spot to trade down, still get something they really need, and get a bunch of draft capital in return because these quarterbacks also played really well. The more murmurs that come out of the combine, the more this hype and info is building to be a trade sooner rather than later, maybe even in the next couple of weeks, in the next 7 days, potentially. I mean, there's a lot bubbling up here, and we'll kind of catch up on where things stand and how the timing of the trade might affect the Bears' off-season plan, certainly with free agency and then heading into draft weekend. Next on Locked On Bears. Historically, we've seen plenty of trades made early ahead of the NFL draft for teams moving down. I think we talked about how the Colts, or no, it wasn't the Colts, but the Jets trading up for Sam Darnold from the number 3 pick, that was done like March 17th, I think. And then one of the other top trades, the Trey Lance trade, I think was March 29th or somewhere around there. So this is not a trade down for the Bears that has to wait until draft day. And the more you keep hearing guys like Adam Schefter and Ian Rappaport, the NFL insiders, talking about the trade interest at the combine, the more it feels like this could happen even right before free agency. So we kind of have to keep an eye on a couple of deadlines here, a couple of dates coming up, because this week, I believe it's Tuesday afternoon, the 7th, is the franchise tag deadline for teams trying to work out some of those deals. Certainly, we're wondering about Lamar Jackson, who's expected to be franchise tagged. I think they may have said they're going to franchise tag him already, but still needs to be officially tagged when the deadline comes up. Perhaps Daniel Jones from the New York Giants. And then some of these teams, there's a ripple effect from here. Do they trade Lamar Jackson to a quarterback-needy team? Does Aaron Rodgers soon make his decision about whether he's going to play for the Packers, retire, or seek a trade to maybe the Jets, maybe the Raiders? The Panthers were another rumored team, and that the Colts maybe, right? Some of these quarterback dominoes may start to fall here in the next, franchise tag deadline is 2 days from now, and then, or I guess Tuesday, so like a day from after this podcast is coming out. And then free agency starts the 13th, or the negotiation period, the pre-tampering, the legal tampering period, as they call it, which is a dumb name. But the opening of legal negotiations begin March 13th. And you wonder if that becomes a little bit of a deadline for teams. Not a deadline, but just we got to figure out our quarterback plan now. And if our quarterback plan is going to be draft a quarterback, then we better get to the number 1 overall pick to make sure that we're getting that quarterback. If we miss out, if I'm the Colts or I'm the Panthers and I miss out on Aaron Rodgers and I miss out on Lamar Jackson and I miss out on, I don't know why they would it doesn't feel like you're missing out on Daniel Jones, but regardless, or Jimmy Garoppolo when he becomes a free agent. Derek Carr, a free agent right now. One of these teams, some of these teams are going to find a veteran that they like and be out of the running for the number 1 overall pick. That's just how it's going to go. But some of these dominoes have to start falling here soon. Starts with the franchise tag, then it's probably going to be Aaron Rodgers after that. Then it's probably going to be Derek Carr after that, because I think the Jets are probably waiting for Rodgers to decide before they decide fully how much they want to give Derek Carr as a potential option there. Then some things start rolling, and if you're the team if this quarterback game of musical chairs is filling up, and you're the team who still doesn't have a quarterback, and there's the chairs are running out. I mean, it's not a great analogy there, but I didn't want to do the classic like looking for a prom date and running out of prom dates. It's none of these are good. None of these are good, clever, or original analogies. But regardless, if you're the Raiders or whoever, and you're looking around and saying, man, we missed out on him, we got rid of Carr, we missed out on Rodgers, Lamar's not available via trade, like all of a sudden, we don't want Jimmy Garoppolo. Like we need a quarterback. We need a rookie quarterback. We need to make sure we go get our guy. Let's up our offer to the Bears and go get the number 1 overall pick. Or maybe it's the Houston Texans who say, screw it, give us 1, Bears go to 2, and then 2 becomes also the next sort of available situation. Once teams figure out who Houston wants to take with the number 1 overall pick, then everybody might try and trade up to that number 2 spot if the Bears do end up making the 1 pick swap there. So a lot of stuff can start rolling here quickly. It's either going to happen right there around the beginning of free agency when these quarterback dominoes fall, or you get through a few days of free agency and it takes a little longer for Jimmy Garoppolo to become a free agent, agree with a team, Derek Carr to finally agree with a team, and who knows when Aaron Rodgers will decide. But you could see this, lingering out a little bit, and then it becomes, okay, who's left? And then those teams that are left start bidding up against each other too. Like how soon will these other teams that aren't going after a veteran quarterback give up on getting that veteran quarterback, right? When will they have to pull the trigger on the draft pick? You could see them getting nervous and wanting to do it now. You could see them trying to play the long game a little bit and really want to see free agency play out a little bit first before they really make that final deal with the Chicago Bears. From a Bears perspective, you can see where we heard Ryan Poles say it at his combine press conference, like there's some advantage to doing it early if perhaps in a trade down, you're going to get a player in return, whether it's, we've heard not actually rumored, but speculation thrown out there. Michael Pittman, the wide receiver from the Colts, could be an option that they could throw in if the Bears move down to 4. Or, Brandon Cooks from the Texans from 1 to 2, right? Some of these different guys that teams might be willing to get rid of in lieu of additional draft capital. Well, also the Bears willing to take on that veteran player in lieu of draft picks to get more of a sure thing at a position of need, particularly one like wide receiver where the free agent class is not particularly strong. So you'd like to have that whatever veteran player you might get in a trade, you'd like to have them on the roster before free agency so you know how much you need to invest at that position. And who knows, maybe they can kind of get a sense of which players may or may not be on the board or on the table for them to get in a trade, and you can kind of play some hypotheticals there for them and say, oh, well, maybe let's not invest here because we think we might get a wide receiver from one of these 2 teams, or however it might play out. But that might be the Bears' incentive to say, screw it, we'll take the trade now, even if you don't want. Do you want to play the long game and risk more teams dropping out of the trade, carousel there? Like if you got 3 or 4 teams bidding and you say, well, let's wait until April, and then a couple of those other teams find other quarterback options, your number of bidders goes down, it's supply and demand there, demand goes down, and then all of a sudden you're not maybe getting as much because you don't have as much bidding for that number 1 overall pick. So it's a tricky situation here. But the NFL Combine is where these conversations really heat up, and that's what all the reporting has been, is that they have really heated up, and teams are engaging, and teams are not exactly scrambling, not exactly getting desperate, but maybe they are on the inside and not showing it on the outside, right? They're starting to feel the heat a little bit, especially as they have their whole staffs and sometimes their owners in Indianapolis watching their future quarterbacks throw, seeing Anthony Richardson out there, seeing CJ Stroud out there, not seeing Bryce Young exactly, but, getting to see those guys up person, that's where you start falling in love with them. You have those in-person meetings with them. You kind of get a sense of like, oh, this is the guy we need. Let's make sure we go and get him. So be on the lookout. Just don't be surprised if we're not too many days away from the Bears potentially trading the number 1 overall pick. It does feel like it's either going to be really soon, within the next 7 days, or it's going to be a month. Like it's going to be until late in free agency that the Bears make that deal. So we're in a pretty peak window right now for potential trade rumors. You can be sure if the Bears make that number 1 overall pick trade, we're going to break it all down for you right here on the Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure you hit that subscribe button wherever you listen to podcasts. That's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Same goes with the Locked On Bears YouTube channel. All of our video podcasts, our YouTube shorts, and much more. Go hit the subscribe button, the like, comment on there as well to join the conversation. Really appreciate you making Locked On Bears your first listen today, however you listen or watch on YouTube. If you're looking for your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Draft podcast. We've got a couple of new hosts over there that are doing a great job coming over from the Draft Network. So if you haven't listened to Locked On NFL Draft in a while, go check it out for more NFL Combine coverage, more draft pick conversation and coverage from the league-wide perspective. We're going to keep breaking down Bears draft prospects not all offseason long, but until draft day. The free agency previews are right around the corner as well. So I hope you'll come on back tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Bears. And of course, another opportunity to bear down.